On the last episode of the vlog, we visited a restaurant that was submerged in the ocean that, by the way, is a Michelin star restaurant, which means that the meal was ultra creative and just unlike any other meal that I've personally ever had in my entire life. We ate things like sea urchins and seaweed flavored ice cream topped with ants. It was truly a life-changing experience. If you want to know more, check out the last video. And now, today's video. Before we get started, let me just say that Norway is one of the more distinctly gorgeous places I've ever visited. I can't recommend visiting the country enough. And even if you don't do anything on this list, I'm sure you'll have a wonderful time traveling through this place. That being said, let's get into this video, which is my top 5 activities you can't miss, Norway edition. Of course, this is just my subjective opinion, based off the little time that I spent in Norway. And remember, I only visited the southern region of Norway, so there is definitely more magic out there to see in this crazy country. Let's get started with the honorable mentions. These are the activities that were super awesome and just barely missed the cut for me. Starting with Pulpit Rock, or Preikestolen as it's named in Norway. This is a wonderful hike that sees you starting in a valley and slowly making your way higher and higher until eventually you reach the tippy top, where there is a view so splendid that you might not believe it really exists. So how come one of the greatest hikes on planet Earth didn't make my list? Well, it's my own fault. I didn't get to finish the hike because I didn't have enough time. I'm actually fairly certain that if I would have had enough time to finish the hike and make it to the iconic view, it probably would have been number 1 on this list. That's how epic it was. But since I didn't complete the hike, I didn't feel right fully judging it. The second honorable mention are the tunnels, or tunnelins as they're called in Norway. I know it may seem a bit silly, but wow, was I impressed by all the different tunnels that exist throughout the country, many of them miles and miles long through the core of a mountain. This one here is the longest tunnel on planet Earth. I will never get tired of saying that I traveled through this tunnel. And it was just so cool to constantly be driving through these over-engineered masterpieces. We drove about 20 hours in total on our trip around Norway, and I'd guess that at least 20% of that time was spent driving through tunnels. A reality which I've never seen in any other country. The last honorable mention is the magical snowy village of Hemsedal. When you imagine a winter wonderland, what you're really envisioning is Hemsedal in Norway. I'm convinced. I am a sucker for a blanket of whiteness, and Mishi is a sucker for building lame snowmen. So even though all we did was drive through here, I will personally never forget how incredible it was to see a place absolutely engulfed in snow during the springtime. It was incredible. Okay, and with the honorable mentions out of the way, let's talk about my top 5 activities you can't miss. Starting with
number 5, Traveling by Ferry.
Okay, so if you're a Norwegian and you're watching this, you probably think I'm totally lame because tunnels and bridges and ferries are super normal to you all, but it is not normal to me. To say that I was stunned when I looked down at my GPS and discovered that I'd be traveling across an ocean while driving is an understatement. I was even more blown away by the fact that this was just a normal part of the road system. Nobody stopped me and asked me for money to enter the ferry. We just sort of drove aboard and drove off after it was over. The 2 ferries that we took were between the cities of Bergen and Stavanger, and we were delighted to find out that these ferries were not just boring boats where you sit in your car and wait. These ferries had lookouts up top where you could go outside and enjoy the wonderful views. It had seating areas with snacks that you could buy. It was just a randomly relaxing part of our road trip experience. And because it was completely unexpected and totally free, it definitely makes my top 5.
Number 4. Staying in Stavanger.
Speaking of ferries, like I just said, we used the ferries to get to the city of Stavanger. When we arrived, it was incredibly windy. So windy, in fact, that Mishi and I couldn't even spend much time outside. And cut us some slack, okay? We're used to Miami, where the weather is currently 90 degrees. We're definitely not used to wind chills taking us down to freezing temperatures. Even with it being too cold for us, we couldn't help but appreciate what a beautiful location we were in. We were lucky enough to book an Airbnb that was on the water, and the view from there was just tremendous. You could spend hours just outside relaxing and watching the birds fly by. And speaking of birds, one of the awesome experiences we had here was meeting a friendly swan. This beautiful creature came up to us and very politely asked us for some bread, to which we happily obliged. The place we stayed at was just filled with birds and seaside houses, and it was just one of the more picturesque locations that we saw in all of Norway. And we didn't even really get to see much of it. Of all the cities that we stayed at in this country, Stavanger was our favorite, even above Oslo and Bergen. We even hope to go back and visit someday during the summer when it's not so ludicrously cold.
Number 3. Relaxing at the Solstrand Hotel.
I made an entire video all about the experience of being here, which is linked in the description below. For me, the Solstrand was everything that I could want in a hotel. Personally, I'm more of a cold weather mountain lover than a hot weather beach lover, so the Solstrand immediately gets bonus points for that. But more than that, the Solstrand just had a wonderful, quaint vibe. It stood at the mouth of a fjord and the Atlantic Ocean, so the views were tremendous. And it had this heated pool that was outside overlooking the breathtaking vista, which was absolutely my favorite swimming pool that I've ever been in. Something about having 100-degree water while it's 40 degrees outside is just perfect. They even let you jump in the fjord here. Not that I can stay in it for more than 2 seconds at a time, but still, that's a heck of an experience. I can't recommend this hotel enough. 5 stars, the pricing was phenomenal, the service was great, the amenities were beautiful, the vibe was perfect for me. If you're all about a relaxing time in the mountains, it just doesn't get much better.
Number 2. Experiencing the Fjord Safari.
It was extraordinarily difficult for me to choose which of the top 2 would end up being number 1 because both experiences were so incredible, but ultimately I settled on this order. Number 2 was the Fjord Safari, and the small thing that made it number 2 instead of number 1 was the rainy weather that we experienced while on the safari. Even though it was rainy, I can't express to you how genuinely breathtaking it was to view a fjord for the first time in my life, and to view it in such a unique way. You can look at a fjord from the land, obviously, but something about being on a boat and traveling through the middle of it, seeing this massive wall of mountains on either side of you, it's the definition of majestic. I felt so blessed to have experienced this boat ride. And our tour guides were just the absolute nicest people you could ask for. The quiet stillness that surrounds you out there when the boat is turned off and you're just in the middle of serene nature is otherworldly. Definitely a bucket list experience to come to Norway and see a fjord like this. And speaking of bucket list,
Number 1. Dining at Under.
I had never before in my life eaten at a Michelin star restaurant. As a matter of fact, I didn't fully understand what could be so grand about eating at one of these places. I'd watch TV shows and see the snobbish chefs and the strange foods, and I'd always think to myself, that food doesn't even look that good. Boy, was I wrong about fine dining. Under is a marvel of modern engineering with the majority of the restaurant's structure existing underwater. But more than that, it is an eye-opening experience for eating. In my last video where we talked about the experience of eating here, I talked about how this wasn't just eating a meal, it was consuming a work of art. And I meant it. These meals are carefully curated and perfectly presented to tickle all of your senses simultaneously. At this restaurant, I ate dish after dish of food I'd never tried before, often dishes I'd never even heard of. And I learned that sometimes part of the spice of life is learning to try new things. It's not often that you walk away from a restaurant having a meal so elevated that it teaches you something new about life, but that was our experience at this place. Under was far and away the most interesting meal I've ever had in my life, and it was one of those once-in-a-lifetime experiences that I will carry with me forever. For that, I have it placed here at my number 1 spot.
Conclusion.
And there you have it. That is my top 5 activities you can't miss in Norway based on the short time that I spent in Norway. What'd you think of my list? Did I miss anything from the southern region of Norway? You want to add something from other places that I didn't get to visit? Let me know in the comments section below. As always, if you enjoyed this video, I'd really appreciate a like as it helps a ton with the algorithm. And if you want to become a traveler like me, definitely subscribe to the channel for more epic content. Next episode will be all about the perfect itinerary for a Norway trip. Until then, I'll catch you all on the flip side.
Peace.